Former combat veteran Marcus Webb worked as a maintenance technician on Alliance Station Meridian. Unglamorous, essential work that kept critical station systems functional, but that most of the station's more prestigious inhabitants never noticed or particularly acknowledged. He'd been working there for 2 years since his military discharge, keeping his head down, performing his job with quiet competence, and being largely invisible to the station's diplomatic community and commercial elite. People kept their distance from Marcus for reasons that had calcified over time into accepted station social norms. He was human, and humans had developed an unfortunate reputation in this sector as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. He was ex-military from a particularly brutal conflict, and persistent rumors suggested he had a violent past that he didn't discuss. He had visible scars, distinctive marks on his face and arms that made many people visibly uncomfortable. He was quiet and didn't engage in the social pleasantries or small talk that lubricated most station interactions, which people consistently interpreted as unfriendly or vaguely threatening. None of it was entirely fair or accurate. Marcus was quiet because he genuinely had nothing to prove to anyone and didn't particularly enjoy meaningless small talk. The scars were from combat injuries sustained while saving most of his unit, not from anything remotely shameful. His military service had ended honorably with commendations for valor. But perception becomes social reality, and the reality on Alliance Station Meridian was that people avoided Marcus Webb. He was mostly fine with this arrangement. After years of intense combat and the sustained chaos that accompanied military service, he genuinely appreciated the solitude that came with maintenance work in the station's less trafficked technical areas. He was genuinely good at his job, received adequate compensation, and didn't particularly need external social validation. Then Queen Suralith of the Velthari Confederation arrived at the station for diplomatic meetings. Queen Suralith was there for high-level negotiations, complex discussions about trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and technology sharing protocols that required weeks of intensive diplomatic work. The station was suddenly filled with Velthari dignitaries, extensive security personnel, and all the elaborate ceremony and protocol that accompanied royal visits. Marcus didn't expect to interact with any of them directly. His maintenance work took him primarily to technical corridors and systems access areas that visiting dignitaries never saw or had reason to enter. But during a routine environmental system repair in one of the station's less accessible control junctions, he encountered Queen Suralith herself, who had apparently slipped away from her official security detail to explore the station more freely than carefully managed official tour typically allowed. "You're the human maintenance technician," she observed. It wasn't phrased as a question. "Yes, Your Majesty." Marcus didn't stop his work. The environmental control system needed this particular repair completed regardless of who happened to be watching. "Everyone on this station seems to deliberately avoid you. Why is that specifically?" Marcus considered how to answer honestly without being inappropriate. "People are generally uncomfortable around me. I'm not particularly social. I have a military background that makes some people nervous, and I don't actively go out of my way to change their existing perceptions. Do you prefer being avoided by others?" "I prefer being left alone to do my work competently. If that preference means people choose to avoid me, that's acceptable." Queen Suralith watched him work with obvious interest. "You're quite competent at what you do. It's my professional responsibility to be competent at my assigned work." Over the next several days of the extended royal visit, Queen Suralith kept appearing in locations where Marcus happened to be working, not obviously or deliberately following him in any creepy sense, but somehow their paths kept crossing in ways that seemed substantially less than purely coincidental. Each time they encountered each other, she asked questions about his specific work, about the station's complex systems, about human cultural practices, about his personal background and military service. Marcus answered honestly and relatively briefly, not attempting to impress her, but also not being deliberately unfriendly or dismissive. Other station personnel began noticing these repeated interactions. Rumors started spreading rapidly. Why was the Velthari queen spending significant time speaking with the antisocial human maintenance worker everyone avoided? Was she investigating him for some undisclosed security concern? Was there some brewing scandal about to emerge publicly? Marcus noticed that people were now actively watching him with obvious suspicion instead of just passively avoiding him, which was somehow substantially worse than the previous arrangement. During one of their encounters, he addressed the situation directly. "Your Majesty, people are starting to talk extensively about you spending time speaking with me. I assume that's not particularly helpful for your diplomatic work here. People always talk about something. What they're saying currently is no more genuinely relevant than what they said previously. They're saying you're wasting valuable time with someone far beneath your notice, or that you must have some undisclosed ulterior motive for speaking extensively with station maintenance staff. And what do you personally think my actual motive is?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think you're genuinely bored with constant diplomatic formality and careful performance. You found someone who doesn't perform or carefully manage their presentation for you. I answer your questions honestly without attempting to manipulate your impression of me or advance some hidden agenda. That's probably genuinely refreshing when literally everyone else you encounter is carefully managing every single word they say to you." Queen Suralith smiled, the first completely genuine smile Marcus had seen from her during the entire visit. "That's remarkably perceptive. You're absolutely correct. Everyone I speak with during these diplomatic visits is performing, consciously trying to impress me or gain favor or advance their specific interests. You simply answer questions honestly and continue your work. It's genuinely refreshing. I'm glad I can provide some entertainment value, but you should be aware that this attention is making my work environment substantially more difficult. People who previously just avoided me are now actively hostile because they apparently think I'm somehow manipulating you for personal gain. Are you asking me to stop speaking with you? I'm informing you of the observable consequences. What you choose to do with that information is entirely your decision." The final night of the royal visit featured an elaborate formal reception, the kind of carefully orchestrated diplomatic event where everyone important attended and maintained perfect social performances throughout. Marcus wasn't invited, obviously. He was working a standard maintenance shift in the station's lower technical levels, which he actually preferred to attending formal diplomatic events anyway. Then his personal communicator signaled an urgent priority message from station administration. "Report immediately to the Grand Reception Hall in formal attire." No explanation provided, just the direct order. Marcus didn't own formal attire of any kind. He showed up in his cleanest work uniform, which earned him multiple disapproving looks from station security, but they ultimately allowed him entry. The reception hall was filled with hundreds of dignitaries, officials, wealthy merchants, and various other important people. Marcus had absolutely no idea why he'd been summarily ordered to appear here. Then Queen Suralith saw him enter, and her expression showed clear satisfaction. She was standing at the center of the elaborate hall, clearly about to make some kind of formal announcement to the assembled crowd. "I have an important announcement regarding my visit to this station," she said, and the hall immediately fell into complete silence. "I came here primarily for diplomatic negotiations, which have been successful. But I also came seeking something more personal. A potential life partner who sees past careful performance and social status to actual character and genuine worth." Marcus suddenly experienced a very strong bad feeling about where this announcement was heading. "During my visit here, I have spent considerable time with someone this station has collectively decided to avoid and dismiss as beneath notice. Someone consistently judged as unfriendly, potentially dangerous, unworthy of respectable society's attention. I found him to be consistently honest, remarkably competent, genuinely perceptive, and refreshingly direct in all interactions. He treated me as a person rather than as a symbol or opportunity to exploit." She was looking directly at Marcus now. Everyone else in the crowded hall was following her gaze, hundreds of eyes suddenly focused entirely on him. "Marcus Webb, human maintenance technician, I am formally declaring my intention to court you with the explicit goal of eventual bonding partnership. This is not political maneuvering or diplomatic theater. It is genuine personal choice based on the character I have directly observed during our numerous conversations. The hall immediately erupted in shocked murmurs and barely controlled chaos. Marcus stood frozen, attempting to process what had just happened. The galaxy's most beautiful and politically powerful queen had just publicly declared her intention to court him in front of hundreds of witnesses. After the reception descended into sustained, controlled chaos, Queen Suralith's security detail escorted Marcus to a private meeting room where she was waiting. "I should have asked you privately before making any public declaration," she said immediately upon his arrival. "That was presumptuous of me. I apologize." "Why?" Marcus asked directly. "Why would you choose me specifically? You could literally have anyone in the known galaxy. Why choose the maintenance worker everyone deliberately avoids? Because everyone else performs carefully for me constantly. Everyone else sees Queen Suralith, symbol and status and opportunity to advance themselves. You see a person who asks questions, and you answer honestly without calculation or hidden agenda. Because you're genuinely competent and take obvious pride in your work, regardless of whether anyone notices or acknowledges it. Because you're honest about consequences. You directly told me my attention was making your life more difficult rather than attempting to use that attention for personal advantage. Because in a galaxy absolutely full of people constantly trying to impress me, you simply treat me like a person who happens to ask a lot of questions. You barely know me. Those conversations were minutes at a time over just a few days. I know you well enough to recognize what genuinely matters. The rest we can learn together if you're willing. People will say you're making a terrible mistake, that you've chosen poorly, that I'm beneath you in every measurable way. People said exactly the same kinds of things about you before I ever spoke with you, that you were someone to avoid, someone dangerous or unfriendly or beneath their notice. They were completely wrong about you then. They're completely wrong about you now. I trust my own direct judgment over their collective prejudice." Marcus considered carefully. What she was offering was completely insane by any reasonable standard. He was a maintenance worker being formally courted by an alien queen. It would inevitably be complicated, probably quite difficult, definitely subject to intense scrutiny and harsh judgment. But he thought about the conversations they'd actually had, how she asked genuine questions and listened carefully to actual answers rather than performing diplomatic scripts, how she deliberately slipped away from her security detail to explore the station on her own terms, how she was standing here now, having just publicly declared for him, and her very first words were an apology for presuming rather than an expectation that he should be grateful. "I'm not going to suddenly become someone comfortable with formal diplomatic events or political maneuvering," he said honestly. "I'm not asking you to become someone fundamentally different. I'm asking if you're willing to explore partnership with me as you actually are." "Yes, I'm willing to explore that possibility." Months later, after Marcus and Queen Suralith had been publicly courting, which involved him splitting his time between station maintenance work and attending Velthari diplomatic events in deeply uncomfortable formal attire, people's perceptions began gradually shifting. Some still thought she'd made a terrible mistake choosing someone so far beneath her social station. But others began noticing specific things. How Marcus treated her with the exact same straightforward honesty he treated everyone, neither intimidated by her status nor attempting to exploit it for advantage. How genuinely competent he was at everything he undertook, from complex station maintenance to learning intricate Velthari cultural protocols to handling intense public scrutiny with quiet dignity. How she appeared more genuinely relaxed and authentic around him than anyone had seen her in formal diplomatic contexts, like she could finally stop performing and simply be a person. When people asked Queen Suralith directly why she had chosen Marcus Webb specifically, her answer remained consistently the same. Because everyone else on that station decided who he was without actually knowing him. I chose to actually know him before making any judgments. And I discovered someone of genuine worth that everyone else had dismissed based purely on prejudice and unfounded assumptions. Their collective failure